Hello everyone and welcome back to my Star Citizen channel. Today I want to talk about something that's got the community pretty divided right now. Some people are genuinely frustrated, others are already hyping it up again. And honestly, as usual, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So, what are we even talking about? We're talking about CIG's monthly newsletters and developer updates. You know, the ones that are supposed to keep us in the loop on what's happening with Star Citizen. And more importantly right now, Squadron 42. And a lot of people have started feeling like the information in these updates has just dried up. Like sure, they show you stuff, but at the end of it, you're sitting there thinking, okay, so what? What did I actually learn about where this game is at? And look, I get it. If you read through one of these newsletters and come out the other side not really knowing anything new, the frustration makes sense. But I still can't fully get behind the outrage, because you have to ask yourself one very simple question first. What is the actual point of these newsletters? The point is to keep us informed about the development, that's it. And if Squadron 42 is genuinely supposed to come out this year and 2026 has continued to be the communicated target, then it kind of follows logically that at some point there just isn't that much new stuff left to report from the development itself. Because at some point the game is done. Or close enough to done that you're not pulling out massive new development milestones every single month. And when that happens, the communication naturally shifts. It stops being about what's still being built. It becomes about how you set up the run to launch. And honestly, that's exactly what this feels like to me right now. So for me, these newsletters aren't a bad sign. If anything, I actually read them as an indirect signal. Not the signal of, here's the release date, everything is confirmed. More like, the way they're communicating right now doesn't feel like an open development phase anymore. It feels like a phase where they're very deliberately controlling what they show and what they hold back. And yeah, I know, a lot of content creators, a lot of veterans in this community, they are still skeptical. They're in the I'll believe it when I see it camp. And honestly, I completely understand that. Personally, I do lean toward thinking it's actually coming this year, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't still have some doubt, because this community has learned to be cautious for a reason. But still, to me, these updates actually lean more towards suggesting the 2026 target is being taken seriously this time. Not as proof, not as a guarantee, but as a signal. Sure, what you could reasonably expect is a clearer release window, maybe more actual gameplay insight into what the finished product looks like. That's totally fair to ask for. But CIG just openly spoiling the game right before a potential release? That would honestly surprise me more. Because think about it. If I were running this company, if I were CIG, if I were Chris Roberts, when would I actually start going all in on marketing? Not months and months in advance. I'd start pushing hard when the release is actually within reach. Because that's when it counts. That's when the money spent on marketing actually does something. And let's not forget, CIG isn't some massive traditional publisher that can run a years-long marketing machine like some of the bigger studios out there. On top of that, Squadron 42 is already well known within this space. The people who've been following Star Citizen for years already know this game exists. There have been leaks, updates, roadmap entries, discussions, teasers, all of it. So it's not like they need to introduce it to this community from scratch. That's why it doesn't surprise me that they are not going full send on marketing just yet. My honest prediction? The real marketing push kicks in when the release is actually close. Maybe fall, maybe late October, maybe November. That's when I'd expect things to really start moving. And look, I've been following Squadron 42 for years. We've all been getting fed information for years. Some of it useful, some of it not so much. But I've reached a point personally where I don't need any more little breadcrumbs. No more hints, no more teasers, no more half promises. I just want to see this thing actually come out. Now there's another argument floating around that I want to address. Some people are saying even the stuff being shown in these newsletters isn't really new information because a lot of it already exists in Star Citizen. And to that I say, yeah, obviously. That's not the gotcha you think it is. Squadron 42 is set in the same universe as Star Citizen. Of course there are overlapping elements. Of course some things look familiar. The designs, the tech, the equipment, the environments. It all belongs to the same world. That's not a problem. To me, that just shows the universe is coherent. And honestly, that's one of the things I'm genuinely excited about. Maybe excited is even underselling it a bit. What I'm really looking forward to is the story, because that's ultimately the whole point of Squadron 42 for me. I don't want to just mindlessly grind through missions. I want to actually be pulled into this world. I want to understand what's happening in this universe, who these people are, what it all means. For me, Squadron 42 is kind of like a good book, one you actually get absorbed into. And I know that's not everyone's thing. Plenty of people will say, I don't care about the story, just give me gameplay. And that's totally fine. But when I'm investing serious time into a game, I want that world to mean something. I want there to be a history behind it. I want things to connect. I don't just want to fly around in a pretty backdrop with nothing underneath it. Now here's the part that would genuinely piss me off. And I mean that. If after all of these newsletters, after all of this very deliberate slow building communication, after this feeling that CIG is very intentionally setting up for something, and then nothing comes. Because at this point, these newsletters aren't just noise to me anymore. They're sending a signal, not a direct one, not an official one, but a signal. And if it turns out all of this leads nowhere again, then at some point you have to ask the uncomfortable question. What is any of this even for? Because if you spend months creating the impression that something is coming and then nothing does, that's not just normal developer caution anymore. That starts to feel like stringing people along. And that would be bad, really bad. Not just for my own patience, but for the trust in this project as a whole. Because I genuinely don't know if all the loyal backers and supporters would just keep going like nothing happened. Sure, there will always be people saying, just wait a bit longer, it'll come. There always are. But I do think another delay would hit a lot of people at the point where they're just done. Not because they suddenly hate the universe, but because even the most patient people have a limit. And I think that needs to be said out loud. Not to be dramatic, not to stir up controversy, but because that's just the reality of a project like this. The longer you build up expectations, the harder it hits when you don't deliver. And then there's one more thing I want to bring up. If CIG actually wants to reach a wider audience with Squadron 42, they need to start no later than around Invictus. For those who don't know, Invictus Launch Week is an annual UEE Navy event that takes place every year in May. In the lore, it marks the beginning of the new recruitment cycle. It's basically the UEE military, showing off its fleet, its strengths, and inspiring new recruits to sign up. And here's the connection that I think is actually really obvious when you think about it. Squadron 42 is a military game. It centers around the 42nd Squadron of the UEE Navy, a legendary unit that, within the lore, is tied to military operations, including the conflict with the Vanduul. And Invictus is literally the UEE military flexing. It's recruitment week. It's exactly the kind of energy that fits Squadron 42 perfectly. If you want to metaphorically recruit new buyers for a game about enlisting in the UEE Navy, there is no better stage than Invictus Launch Week. It just fits. Military-themed event on one side, military single-player game set in the same universe on the other. And on top of that, right now, Squadron 42 is mostly known to people who've been deep in the Star Citizen world for years. But marketing isn't just about reaching the people who are already in. It's about reaching the people who've maybe heard the name once but never really understood what it is, or the people who've never heard of it at all. And that's honestly how I'm going to judge how serious CIG is about this release window. Not by newsletters, not by subtle hints, by whether they actually start making Squadron 42 visible outside of their own community. At the end of the day, I'm at a very simple point. I don't need any more breadcrumbs. I don't need another promise. I just want to see Squadron 42 actually come out. And until then, I'm reading these newsletters not as some big revelation, but not as worthless noise either. To me, they're a sign that the communication has shifted. Less about ongoing development, more about building anticipation. And maybe, just maybe, that's actually the signal that matters most. That the release is closer than a lot of people think right now. I genuinely hope that's true. I really hope you like my laid-back style again. I'd love to hear your comments below the video. I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on the release of Squadron 42. I'd also love to know what you think of the latest Squadron 42 newsletters. I know some people say they don't contain any useful information, but I'm sure they're worth talking about. Let me know if you feel the same way, and see you next time. Ciao.